Welcome to VENTANA Fine Art and our Highlight series, featuring 6 of our esteemed painters. We are located in Santa Fe on the beautiful and historical Canyon Road. This year, our scheduled one-person shows have been made virtual, live, on Facebook with Zoom. Wolfgang Mabry was our narrator for these live interviews. Please visit VENTANAFineArt.com to see these fascinating and narrative interviews. I'd like to begin with Doug Dawson, Colorado artist Doug Dawson. Doug was the first artist that I talked to when I opened the gallery in 1983. Doug was reluctant to come to our gallery because he said his work wasn't Southwestern. My reply was, all good work sells anywhere. And 37 years later, here we are. So I guess there's no surprise that we're good friends 37 years later. Doug is a painter, teacher, husband, father, and man of faith. He and his wife Sue recently celebrated their 54th wedding anniversary. He is patient and kind, articulate and philosophical, inspiring and caring. His wicked sense of humor always makes me laugh. Doug's pastel and oil paintings reflect his diverse interest. His subjects including haunting nocturnes, evocative portraits, colorful still life compositions, and pastoral landscapes, often rushing or placid water. A regular award winner, he participates in prestigious museum exhibitions and has been featured in countless articles. His vibrant artworks have been included in instructional books, one of which he wrote himself titled, Capturing Light and Color with Pastel. Respected by his peers, Doug is a member of the national organizations, including the American Watercolor Society and the International Association of Pastel Societies. In 2008, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame of the Pastel Society of America. He was a driving force and founder of the Denver Art Students League and continues to teach at this national forum, which is fashioned after New York's Art Students League. I'm not alone in loving the unique way that Doug interprets the many moods of the world we live in. As Elizabeth Delaney says in his Southwest Art quote, he infuses intellect with intuition, discovering a methodical yet fluid way to interpret the surroundings that intrigue him in richly complex lines, light, and color.
Hello, my name is Joyce Robbins. When I look at a Dick Evans painting, the first thing I respond to is bold color, then its energy and its mystery. That Dick's landscapes are not literal, but abstract interpretations add to that mystery. To quote Dick Evans, a painting without mystery is a painting without soul. Dick received his first degree in painting and drawing, but didn't immediately pursue being a painter. For many years, he taught art and ceramics at the university level. As an artist, he created huge ceramic murals that were painterly abstracted landscapes. In 1987, he had resigned his tenured full professorship at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He became a full-time artist. But in 1990, he found himself watching old Western movies just to enjoy the landscape. It was time to return to his native New Mexico. One day in Santa Fe, in his studio, he opened up his kiln and everything on the top shelf was either cracked or warped. He just closed it and drove to town and bought paint and canvas. So, for the last 30 years, Dick has been a painter and never looked back. He is intrigued by New Mexico's landscapes because of its extraordinary light, expansive space, and incredible shapes. His inspiration comes from exploring its wilderness, often while fly fishing. Being remote recharges his senses. Back in the studio, he brings the feeling of the unknown and the intensity of nature to canvas. Again, to quote Dick, "A work of art should not give you the answer, it should give you a compelling reason to search." Many of his recent paintings delve deeply into emotional realms, often becoming totally abstract. He introduces elements of form and color that may seem arbitrary, but they are not. Rather, he intends them to excite the interplay between the intellect and the subconscious. The rich dynamics of Dick's paintings have resulted in him being widely collected. His work can be found in 20 museums, private homes, as well as over 12 corporations.
Hello, I'm Wolfgang Mabry. When I first came to Ventana about 16 years ago, an artist friend of mine mentioned that Barry McEwen's gallery had closed. We decided to contact this renowned plein air master, and he invited us out to his studio to have a look at the works that were available and make a selection for the first showing at Ventana. Well, I went out there and I was just dumbstruck by the variety and the skill in his work. Beautiful plein air works, just filled with atmosphere and sun. Just gorgeous things. His subjects were Texas, New Mexico landscapes, and there were a few European scenes in there. Interesting story about Barry. Some time ago, he was up painting the St. Francis of Assisi Mission Church in Ranchos de Taos, a very famous church, the big buttresses there, and he noticed that there was a young woman setting up her easel in the 8,000-foot elevation sun there. So he thought, well, that's not going to be good for her eyes. So he invited her over to paint in the shade of a tree where he was painting. Well, that young lady was Lynn Windsor, an English artist, and they ended up falling in love, getting married. And that's how Barry discovered the joy of painting landscapes in England, Scotland, and France. They would make trips across the Atlantic ever since then. So part of what makes Barry so great is he's as a plein air master. He starts with an underpainting of his subject, and he always paints from life. He just goes right out there, sets up his easel, and if he's going to paint a large painting, he'll make a field study and then paint the large painting in the studio from that. But he lets little bits of his underpainting show through, and that really gives a richness and a complete realism to his work. I mean, it's painterly in a sense of having some loose strokes, but you know exactly where it is. You get the feeling, the atmosphere, the whole thing in Barry's work. So it's been a thrill to work with Barry. He's a real star, and we're just excited to have him here. So enjoy his art.
My name is Jacob Martinez. Margaret Ness and I have an affinity for Taos. My family is from Ranchos de Taos, and Margaret has called Taos her home for 50 years now. She joined Ventana in 2016, and we consider ourselves fellow Taoseños. Margaret had an international childhood. Born in Paris, France, she spent much of her youth in Morocco, Libya, and Egypt. As a teenager, she was sent to boarding school in Maryland, where her aunt and uncle lived. In 1969, after a short visit with her grandmother in California, she decided to explore New Mexico and never left. The sensuous shapes and curves of the New Mexican adobes reminded her of the North African architecture that she grew up with. Margaret's distinctly personal vision is inspired by travels, memory, and her surroundings. For 30 years, she lived and worked in a 2-story log home that she and her husband Bob hand-built on the Llama Mountain in the Carson National Forest north of Taos. In 1996, it was destroyed by a wildfire. Eventually, they moved into a house closer to Taos. Today, Margaret's new space enjoys views of massive Taos Mountain to the east and the endless sky and mesas to the west. Margaret finds her themes by honing in on deceptively simple spaces. She gravitates to oppositions, light and dark, flat and round, angles and curves, symmetry and asymmetry, positive and negative space. The forms are typically objective, but nothing in the picture is literal. Using pastel pigments, she blends both rich and subtle hues that convey a sculptural quality. Margaret exhibits widely. Locally, you can see her work in invitational shows at the Millicent Rogers and Harwood Museums, both in Taos. Farther afield, she's exhibited in the Denver Art Museum, the rotunda of the Russell Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C., and the Art in the Embassies program in Morocco. Margaret Ness's simplified geometric forms have global appeal.
In the mid-1990s, I met Mary Silverwood, and I was so drawn to the purity of her pastel pigments, conveying the hues of nature and the shapes of nature. Mary's journey began in Texas, where she got her BFA from the University of Texas, working only in oils. Upon graduation, she moved to Northern California. It didn't take long for her to realize that she had no idea how to become a professional artist. Thinking she needed to study something practical, she enrolled in an accounting class at Sonoma State University. When I asked her about that experience, she had one word for it: dreadful. But there was a silver lining. After 2 classes, she wandered into the art department, where they were teaching pastel painting. Mary loved to draw, and she loved color. Pastel painting combines them both, setting her on the path of becoming one of this country's renowned pastelists. Because she was passionate about Mother Earth, she committed herself to landscape painting. She even went so far to change her last name to Silverwood, silver meaning money and wood representing landscapes. In the early 1980s, Mary first visited New Mexico. She was overwhelmed, stating, "I got off the plane and immediately bought pastels in 20 shades of blue." She was immediately a New Mexican at heart and moved here in the year 2000. The clarity of New Mexico's colors inspired her up to her death in 2011 at age 79. Mary once told me that her paintings were just shape and color. When she drove through New Mexico and photographed the landscape, she responded to the shapes of juxtaposed color fields. She took the feel of the place back to the studio, where she dramatized the emotional exuberance the landscape conveyed to her. Mary Silverwood's paintings are known for their saturated colors. They illuminate any room with dazzling energy and exuberance.
Hello, I'm Wolfgang Mabry. Ventana Fine Art represented John Nieto for 33 phenomenal years. He was our top-selling artist the entire time and was featured annually in Santa Fe's famed Indian market. Today, Ventana specializes in reacquisitions of John Nieto originals, treasures being relinquished by people who might be downsizing or by heirs who cannot accommodate another great painting. Before moving to Santa Fe, I had admired reproductions of John Nieto's work. When I finally saw his paintings in person, I was awestruck by their power. Nieto had brought Fauvist color design to paintings of peoples and animals native to North America. He always did so with the greatest respect for his subjects, and he always took care to let authenticity shine through his signature graphic style. Bold outlines, strategic manipulations of proportion, and striking color combinations would have been enough to make him a huge and influential success. But Nieto also had a rare skill for conveying facial expressions, especially eyes. Those piercing Nieto eyes would often follow viewers around the room, telling stories of courage, integrity, and honor. They draw the viewer beyond the surface and into the private life stories of the animals and people that held meaning to him. Nieto also paid homage to his other heroes, the great artists of the past, including Botticelli, Vermeer, Dürer, Matisse, and Gauguin. During Nieto's last 2 years, he painted cubist versions of heroes in his Native American history, and he wanted nothing more than to continue his homage to Pablo Picasso, the artist he admired most out of the hundreds he studied and knew by heart. Like many who got to meet John Nieto, I will miss his great intelligence, his personal warmth, and the excitement of seeing new works emerge from his limitless imagination and skill. Happily, we can revisit some of those qualities in a beautiful coffee table book, John Nieto, Forces of Color and Spirit, published by Ventana and now available at Ventana Fine Art.
Well, this concludes our Artist Highlight series. We would like to thank our artists, our art collectors, and our art enthusiasts for sharing and watching these videos. And if you would like to add a piece of art to your collection, we would greatly appreciate it. Many thanks.